It was the sort of spring day that people posted about on social media. Sunlight cascading through budding trees, neighbors laughing as they washed their cars or walked their dogs. Inside a neat, two-story home in the suburbs, Emma and David Milligan were the very portrait of marital harmony. Or so it seemed to everyone who knew them. Emma, with her chestnut hair and easy laugh, had a talent for making their home feel like the brightest spot in the neighborhood. She arranged fresh flowers every Monday, hosted book clubs in the living room, and volleyed playful banter with David in front of guests. At work, her colleagues admired her warmth and sense of order. She was the dependable friend, the loving wife everyone envied. David was, to outsiders, her perfect match. He worked as a financial advisor downtown, known for his measured advice and steady presence at office gatherings. His friends described him as loyal, disciplined, the sort of man you could trust with your secrets or your savings. Together, Emma and David were the golden couple at every neighborhood barbecue and holiday party. Their wedding photos occupied a place of pride on the mantle. Emma in a tasteful ivory dress, David smiling in a classic black tuxedo, both of them radiating the easy confidence of people convinced their happiness would never wane. But like all polished surfaces, there's hid imperfections too faint for most to notice. In quiet moments, when the dinner guests had gone and the lights were low, Emma sometimes found herself restless. She'd lie in bed beside David, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, staring at the ceiling and wondering if this predictable, safe life was really enough. David, she sensed, didn't notice her drifting thoughts. Or if he did, he chose not to see them. It wasn't unhappiness exactly, more like a hunger for something unnamed, an ache for excitement or risk that didn't fit into their careful routines. Emma suppressed these feelings, dismissing them as a passing phase. But they lingered, growing stronger with each quiet night. Small cracks appeared in their perfect marriage. David began working later hours. Emma joined a new fitness class and started spending more time with friends who relished the thrill of flirting, of breaking little rules. Conversations at home grew thinner, filled with polite questions and absent answers. One night, after a particularly tense dinner, Emma found herself scrolling through social media, pausing on photos of distant friends who seemed to live with reckless abandon, traveling alone, attending wild parties, falling into messy, passionate relationships. A twinge of envy hit her. She wondered what it might feel like to break free from routine, to chase a fantasy instead of playing it safe. David noticed her distance, but attributed it to stress. He told himself that every marriage had its quiet seasons, that things would return to normal in time. But he too began to change. He checked Emma's phone when she left it on the kitchen counter. He felt a chill when she looked at him across the breakfast table, her gaze unfocused, as if she were searching for someone he was not. The outside world still saw Emma and David as perfect, but within the walls of their home, the gap between them widened, a silent question building. How far would either go to feel alive again? On a Friday evening in May, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Emma poured herself a glass of wine and sat alone in the living room. David was late again, no call, no message. She stared at her reflection in the window, wondering if it was possible to want more without losing everything she had. That night, the air in their home felt charged with possibility and dread, a storm gathering just beyond the horizon of their carefully curated lives. Neither could know that the choices they would make in the coming weeks would shatter their picture-perfect world forever. Emma's life shifted in subtle, electric ways after that uneasy spring night. She found herself hungrier for stimulation, her mind wandering while she worked, her eyes lingering too long on text exchanges and the flirty conversations she now indulged in at her new fitness class. It started harmlessly, a way to feel alive, smiling a little too brightly at a handsome stranger in the locker room, accepting an invitation to join a late coffee run with classmates who were younger, flirtier, less tangled in domestic routine. What surprised Emma most was not the attention she received. She was used to friendly banter, appreciative glances, but how much she craved it. She would replay the day's harmless flirtations in her head on the drive home, a faint smile on her lips as guilt and excitement coiled inside her chest. When David asked about her new friends, she deflected with vague enthusiasm, omitting the details that mattered most. David, for his part, tried to reconnect. He suggested date nights, planned a weekend getaway to the lake, bought tickets to a comedy show. Emma went along, never objecting, but never fully present either. The effort, if anything, exposed the distance between them even more starkly. During dinner at a trendy new restaurant, Emma scrolled through her phone under the table, half listening as David discussed office politics. At the lake, she looked out at the water, her mind on a message waiting to be answered. It was at her fitness class that Emma first encountered Mark, a charismatic instructor with a playful grin and an intensity that made everyone in the room feel seen. Mark's energy was effortless. He joked with students, offered hands-on guidance, and carried himself with a confidence that bordered on magnetic. When he corrected Emma's posture with a gentle touch, electricity shot through her spine. Soon, Emma found herself gravitating to Mark's classes, dressing just a bit more carefully, staying late to chat while others filed out. Mark noticed, of course. He asked questions about her life, her marriage, the things she wanted but rarely named. Emma's answers became less guarded as she basked in the thrill of being truly noticed. She told herself it was just a harmless crush, an ego boost. But each interaction fed the hunger that was growing inside her. David began to sense the change. He spotted Emma beaming at her phone in the evenings, laughter spilling out as she traded private jokes with someone unnamed. He asked about her day, about her new friends. Emma answered with cheerful vagueness, changing the subject or brushing off his concerns. David grew anxious, his insecurities bubbling to the surface. He began to invent reasons to pop into her gym, offering to pick her up or drop by with a forgotten water bottle. The first time David met Mark, the tension was immediate. Mark greeted him with the same confident charm he offered everyone. But David saw what Emma tried to hide. The way Mark's eyes lingered on her, the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed at his jokes. David's stomach twisted in knots. That night at home, David confronted Emma. "Is there something I should know about you and this Mark guy?" Emma tried to laugh it off, but her voice caught. "Don't be ridiculous. He's just my instructor. He's like that with everyone." David nodded, but the seed of doubt had been planted. As Emma retreated to the bedroom, still texting, still smiling, David stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the blinking light on her phone. Emma knew she was playing with fire, but the excitement was undeniable, a bright, burning thread running through her otherwise gray routines. For the first time in years, she felt powerful, desired, and free. She told herself it was all under control, that she held the reins, that she could step back whenever she chose. But when she finally drifted off to sleep, Mark's voice echoed in her mind, blending seamlessly with the rush of possibility. For Emma, a new world was opening, one that thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. The boundaries of her marriage, once so clear, were growing blurrier by the day. Emma grew used to living a double life, her days split neatly in two. The first half belonged to routine, work, chores, dinner with David, the small rituals of a long marriage. The second half was a world of secret messages, glances across a busy fitness studio, and the intoxicating thrill of being desired by someone new. To her colleagues and neighbors, nothing about Emma had changed. She still brought homemade banana bread to office meetings, texted reminders to neighbors about trash day, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. But the Emma who came home at night felt increasingly like a stranger to herself, reckless and alive in a way she hadn't felt since her 20s. David noticed the change, even as he pretended not to. He watched her flit around their home with new energy, her phone always close, her moods unpredictable. He'd wake to find her scrolling late into the night, screen glowing softly on her face as she traded messages with Mark long after the rest of the world had slipped away. Sometimes, David imagined asking her outright, "Are you unhappy with me? Do you want more than this life?" But each time, the words died in his throat, fear and pride binding his tongue. Meanwhile, Emma and Mark's connection deepened with every encounter. What started as harmless flirting grew bolder. Mark sent her late-night texts, sometimes just a joke, sometimes a compliment that left her blushing in the dark. When Emma felt brave, she sent back teasing replies, trailing the edge of what she knew to be safe. After class one evening, Mark offered Emma a ride home. The conversation was easy, full of laughter and inside jokes, but when he pulled up outside her house, a quiet tension hung in the air. "Thanks for the ride," she said, unbuckling her seatbelt. Mark rested his hand on the steering wheel. "Anytime, Emma." He hesitated, then added softly, "You know, I like talking with you, more than with most people." Emma felt her breath catch, nervous, elated, and guilty all at once. She smiled, stepped out, and hurried up the walk, her pulse pounding in her ears. Inside, David sat in the living room, pretending to read the news, but listening for the door. "Everything okay?" he asked as she hung up her coat. "Fine," Emma answered quickly, cheeks flushed. Class ran late. David watched her head upstairs, his doubts festering. From that night on, Mark's text became bolder. He sent compliments about her hair, her eyes, the way she commanded a room. Emma resisted at first, but found herself anxiously awaiting his next message. She justified it. Everyone had harmless crushes, didn't they? But sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, she worried she'd already crossed an invisible line. Emma shared little with her friends, fearing their judgment. But once, over wine, her best friend Julia noticed Emma, seemed distracted, and asked, "Is everything all right with you and David?" Emma hesitated, then lied. "Of course, just work stuff." But Julia studied her, unconvinced. "If you ever need to talk." Emma changed the subject, unwilling to shatter her perfect image. On a rainy Thursday, Mark suggested they get coffee after class. "Just as friends, right?" he joked. In the cafe's quiet corner, conversation drifted to dreams, regrets, and the thrill of breaking rules. "I think about you a lot," Mark finally admitted, his voice low. Emma's heart thudded in her chest. "This is dangerous," she whispered, but she didn't mean it to end. Mark squeezed her hand beneath the table. That evening, guilt crashed over Emma in waves, but it was paired with a powerful sense of agency she hadn't felt in years. She came home late, and David was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed. "Where were you?" His tone was sharper than he intended. "Coffee with a friend," she answered, eyes challenging his suspicion. David nodded, but the truth hung unspoken between them. Both Emma and David knew that trust was dissolving, replaced by secrecy, longing, and fear. Behind closed doors, their marriage was no longer a safe harbor, but a storm no one dared to name. Emma's lips tingled with the memory of Mark's hand, the casual but deliberate squeeze beneath the coffee shop table. Her phone vibrated in her purse on the way home, Mark's name flashing across the screen with a simple message. "Coffee was the best part of my day." She smiled to herself, then forced the smile away as guilt nipped at her conscience. At home, the atmosphere between Emma and David grew heavier. Their conversations became short and brittle. Emma retreated into her phone and her thoughts. David retreated into late-night work emails and solitary runs through the neighborhood. They spoke like housemates, not lovers, each aware of the distance, neither brave enough to address it. In the days that followed, Mark's text became a lifeline for Emma. With him, she was seen, heard, desired. The boundaries of friendship and flirtation blurred. When Mark sent her a playlist for when you're missing adventure, Emma listened on repeat, letting the music carry her away. She began to confide in him, sharing fears and secrets she kept even from David. One evening, after a stormy class, Mark offered her a ride home and suggested they stop for a drink. The bar was dimly lit, the air thick with possibility. They talked for hours, laughter mingling with confessions. Mark leaned closer, their knees touching under the table, electricity crackling between them. "Are you happy?" he asked, his gaze searching. Emma couldn't lie. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm even the same person I used to be." Mark nodded, his voice gentle. "You don't have to settle for ordinary, Emma. You deserve to feel alive." That night, As Mark drove her home, his hand lingered on her knee. Emma didn't stop him. When he parked outside her house, they sat in silence for a long moment. Emma looked at Mark, heart pounding, then leaned in and kissed him, soft, searching, then hungry. The world outside the car faded into darkness. They parted breathlessly, both aware of the line they had just crossed. Inside, David was waiting up. His expression was unreadable as Emma came in, cheeks flushed, hair just slightly disheveled. "You're home late," he said quietly. "Class ran long," she replied, her voice steady in a way that surprised even her. He nodded, not pressing, but the skepticism was clear in his eyes. The next morning, Emma woke with a strange sense of exhilaration and dread. Her phone buzzed. Mark again, this time a string of heart emojis. She smiled in spite of herself, the guilt again trailing just behind the joy. David, meanwhile, began to unravel. He started keeping tabs on Emma's routines, checking the location app on her phone, noticing details he'd ignored for years. His sleep was restless. He woke often, plagued by dreams of Emma slipping away from him, by half-remembered images of her laughing with another man. One evening, unable to suppress his paranoia any longer, David confronted Emma. His voice was tentative, tired. "Is there something going on with you and Mark?" Emma, startled, hesitated only a split second too long. "Don't be ridiculous. He's just a friend." But David heard the fracture, the note of dishonesty. He didn't push further. He didn't have to. The answer was now a shadow in every room. Emma retreated to the shower that night, letting the water wash over her as she wrestled with fear and exhilaration. What had begun as a game, a harmless flirtation to soothe her restlessness, was turning into something far more dangerous. She wondered if she could keep living in both worlds, or if, eventually, one would have to break. In the following days, Emma and Mark's relationship escalated. Texts became calls, calls became secret rendezvous. Every moment apart was filled with anticipation, every meeting charged with danger. But Emma's heart ached too. At night, lying beside David, she wondered what she was losing in her search for excitement. David, wrestling with his own fear and anger, found himself daydreaming of confrontation, of following Emma just to know the truth. The boundaries of love and obsession blurred. A storm was coming, and everyone in Emma's world could sense it, even if no one dared to speak its name. Emma could hardly believe how quickly her life had changed. Just weeks earlier, she drifted through her days on autopilot, her marriage a slow rhythm of comfort and disappointment. Now, every hour throbbed with anticipation and danger. She woke up thinking of Mark, watched the clock at work, and counted down the minutes until their next stolen meeting. Their secret romance bloomed in the shadows. Mark knew how to make her feel alive. He sent morning messages, left notes tucked in her gym bag, and met her in quiet corners of the city where no one would recognize them. Their passion was a force Emma hadn't felt since her early 20s, reckless and all-consuming. One afternoon, in the back booth of a nearly deserted cafe, Mark took her hand and kissed it softly, whispering, "You deserve more than you've settled for." Emma's heart fluttered at his words, but fear always followed pleasure. At home, she was haunted by David's quiet longing, his concern turning to suspicion. She slept fitfully, sometimes waking to David watching her in the semi-dark, his face stricken with questions he couldn't bring himself to ask. Emma wasn't blind to the pain she was causing. Sometimes, she'd catch herself mid-laugh with Mark and feel a sharp, shameful pang. She wanted to let go, to run back to her old life. Yet she also craved the freedom and electricity her affair brought. David tried to bridge the growing chasm between them. He proposed weekend trips, sent her flowers, and made reservations at her favorite restaurants. Emma appreciated the gestures, but found herself growing restless and annoyed at his efforts. The rituals that once comforted her now felt constricting. The secret changed Emma. Her friends noticed how she radiated energy, how she seemed distracted, lit from within and yet far away. Julia cornered her one afternoon. "Emma, are you seeing someone?" Emma's denial was quick but unconvincing. "Of course not. I'd never." Julia's eyes narrowed. Just be careful. Secrets eat people alive. But caution was quickly swept aside by the fantasy's rush. Mark suggested a weekend getaway. Just us, no pretending, no hiding. At the lake, you mind. The idea was intoxicating. After a brief internal struggle, Emma agreed, fabricating a story about a work retreat for David. That weekend, she and Mark drove out of town, laughter bubbling in the car, hands entwined as music played low. The rented cabin by the water felt like a world apart. No expectations, no guilt, only pleasure. For 2 days, they lived a life of passion and possibility, making love without fear, sharing secrets late into the night. On Sunday, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Mark held her face between his hands and whispered, "We could have this, Emma. We could have more." Her heart ached at the thought. She told herself it was a fantasy, delicious, doomed, impossible in real life. Still, as she drove home, her mind replayed every second, a bittersweet ache in her chest. Returning home, the fantasy shattered against reality's jagged edges. David greeted her with warmth, but also unease, peering into her eyes for signs of the truth. Emma, exhausted and sun-kissed, could barely meet his gaze. That night, lying in bed beside her husband, Emma wondered how long she could balance on the knife's edge between two worlds. The fantasy with Mark grew more demanding by the day, its pull almost irresistible. But her real life, David, their shared history, the home they'd built, wasn't something she could simply discard. Emma knew she was playing a dangerous game. The fantasy, once a secret escape, had begun to take root in reality, threatening to unravel everything she once took for granted. The weeks following Emma and Mark's secret getaway were marked by a tension that pulsed through every corner of Emma and David's home. The walls, once filled with the easy silence of routine, now echoed with suspicion and uncertainty. Emma found herself moving through her days like an actor on a collapsing stage, smiling at neighbors, chatting in the grocery store, exchanging pleasantries with David as guilt rotted her from within. David, for his part, had become a man haunted by doubt. He studied Emma constantly, analyzing every smile, every late return from work, every whispered phone call. The intimacy between them, once a safe, unspoken language of shared glances and inside jokes, had faded into an elaborate performance where neither trusted the script. On a Thursday evening, David confronted Emma after dinner. He paused at the edge of the living room, voice low and steady. "Are you seeing someone else?" Emma's heart hammered her chest. She shook her head, but her denial lacked conviction. "No, David. I'm just stressed. Work's been crazy." His eyes reflected the ache of knowing a lie when he heard one. "Is it Mark?" Emma's breath caught. The name hovered in the air, more dangerous than any accusation. She stared at him, uncertain if his question was a guess, a premonition, or a truth he already knew. "I barely know him," Emma lied, voice trembling. David turned away, shoulders collapsing. He said nothing more that night, but the silence between them was louder than any fight. From that moment on, their marriage unraveled faster. David became withdrawn, working late, sometimes not coming home until after midnight. Emma sank deeper into her affair, meeting Mark in hotel rooms, parking lots, and the back booths of quiet bars. Each secret rendezvous thrilled her, but each time she returned home, the rush was replaced by dread. Friends noticed the changes. Julia, determined to help, cornered David at a neighborhood gathering. "You and Emma seem off. Is everything all right?" David shrugged, exhausted. "Maybe we just drifted too far." In their separate orbits, Emma and David each clung to what scraps of comfort remained. Some nights, Emma would try to bridge the gap, cooking David's favorite meal or suggesting a walk together. But the words caught in her throat, drowned by the weight of everything she didn't say. David, in turn, began searching for solace elsewhere. Long drives late at night, old friends he hadn't seen in years, anything to numb the ache of loss. Emma's relationship with Mark became more urgent, more reckless. Mark, emboldened by her devotion and his own growing feelings, pressed her to make a choice. Leave him, Emma. I want you with me. All of you. But the idea, leaving her marriage, her home, her history, filled her with panic. Torn between two worlds, Emma felt herself fragmenting. The fantasy that had once given her wings was now weighing her down, binding her to a chain of lies that threatened to drag her under. Late one night, unable to sleep, Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of tea in her hands. She realized she no longer recognized the woman she had become. She had wanted adventure, a taste of something more, but now she stood at the edge of a precipice, unsure what awaited if she fell. David, in his own room, scrolled through old photos on his phone, a collage of better days. He wondered at what point he had lost the woman he loved, and whether she had ever truly been his to lose. As summer gave way to a stormy autumn, their marriage, once the envy of their friends, was little more than a brittle truce, holding together only out of habit and fear. Neither could guess how close they were to the breaking point, or how soon their secret lives would collide with deadly force. Autumn arrived with icy rain and sharp winds, as if the weather itself sensed the mounting chaos inside Emma and David's fractured home. Emma moved through her days in a fog, each step heavier than the last. She felt pulled in two directions: Mark's urgent texts and whispered promises on one side, the old comfort of home and marriage on the other. Mark's demands for more of her time grew insistent. "We can't keep hiding, Emma," he said one night as they lay tangled in hotel sheets, the city lights flickering through the curtains. "I want a real life with you, mornings and dinners and holidays. Don't you?" Emma's answer was a whisper, "I don't know if I can." But Mark's disappointment lingered, and she left that night already dreading the next ultimatum. David, meanwhile, had begun his own dangerous search for answers. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, he followed Emma one stormy afternoon after she rushed off with little explanation. From the shadows of a parking lot, he watched as she slipped into Mark's car, her laughter drifting through the rain like a melody he barely recognized. He didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, he drove in circles, rage and heartbreak warring in his chest, memories crashing in on him like waves. He remembered their first kiss, their wedding vows, the dreams they'd built together. All of it now seemed to belong to someone else. Emma, feeling the tension in her marriage thickening, grew reckless. She and Mark stopped being careful, meeting openly for lunch, texting even when David was home. The thrill had morphed into an addiction. She no longer knew who she was without it. She told herself she was in control, but the truth was control had slipped through her fingers long ago. One evening, David sat Emma down at the kitchen table, the silence between them brittle as glass. "I know about Mark," he said, his voice flat. Emma didn't deny it, couldn't. "I'm sorry, David. I never wanted it to get this far." He stared at her, trying to find the woman he once knew. "Do you love him?" "I don't know," she replied honestly, tears stinging her eyes. "I love what he makes me feel. I love not being invisible anymore." David's anger flared. "So that's it? You destroy us for a feeling." Emma shook her head, sobbing now. "I want things I can't even name. I never wanted to hurt you." That night, David slept on the couch, heart pounding with resentment and loss. Emma lay awake in their bed, staring at the ceiling, the distance between them now an uncrossable chasm. The next day, Mark pressed Emma for a decision. "Leave him. Start over with me. I can't keep doing this in secret." Emma wavered, desperation clawing at her. "I can't just walk away from my whole life." "Then what is this?" Mark snapped, hurt and anger twisting his features. "Am I just an escape for you?" Emma's silence was his answer. By the end of the week, Emma and David barely spoke. Every interaction was weighted with grief and accusation. The trust that once glued them together had shattered. Both felt unmoored, drowning in regret and longing. Something had changed irreversibly. Lines once unthinkable had been crossed, and there was no returning to the people they once were. The home they had built together, once a sanctuary, was now a battleground. Neither Emma nor David knew that the choices they made in the coming days would plunge them both into a night darker than either could have imagined. The storm that had been threatening for weeks finally broke. Rain battered the windows. Lightning flashed against the dark sky, and the Milligan home felt smaller and more isolated than ever. That night, everything changed. Emma and David spent the evening in separate rooms, neither speaking. Emma's thoughts churned. She had ignored Mark's texts all afternoon, telling herself she needed space to think. David, meanwhile, stared at the family photos on the mantelpiece, haunted by the memories of better days. As midnight approached, Emma sat alone in their bedroom, the blankets pulled up to her chin, listening to the rain. She jumped when a door slammed downstairs. David's footsteps echoed on the staircase, heavy and determined. He appeared at the doorway, soaked with anger and something darker. "Are you happy now?" David's voice was hoarse, his eyes red-rimmed. "Is this what you wanted?" Emma could barely meet his gaze. "David, please. Don't. Just don't." He snapped, voice trembling between rage and pain. "After everything, you throw it all away. For what?" She sat in silence, unable to answer. The rain intensified, thunder shaking the windows. Suddenly, Emma's phone buzzed, a message from Mark. David snatched the phone before she could react. Reading the screen, "I miss you. Please just call me. I'll be waiting." His face contorted in anguish. Something snapped. David hurled the phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. "He's waiting for you, huh? Maybe you should just go to him." Emma burst into tears, but David's anger surged. He paced the room, back and forth, fists clenched. In his grief, his words turned cruel. "You ruined everything. You ruined me." Emma stood her ground, voice trembling. "You think this is all my fault? You never even noticed I was slipping away, David. You only cared when you started to lose." He glared at her, breathing heavy. "Maybe I didn't see it because I trusted you." The tension escalated, words turning to shouting, shouts to chaos. A vase crashed to the floor. Emma tried to leave, but David blocked the door, desperate to keep her from running to Mark. Hands reached, struggled, pushed. In the struggle, Emma shoved David backwards, harder than she intended. He slipped on the scattered debris, head striking the corner of a nightstand with a sickening thud. Everything was suddenly, impossibly still. Emma stared, frozen, as David crumpled to the floor, blood spreading in a slow, dreadful pool. Her own scream seemed distant and hollow in her ears. She dropped to her knees, hands shaking as she tried to wake him, to stop the bleeding, to rewind the last 30 seconds. But David didn't stir. The wind howled outside, matching the horror that surged inside Emma. Panicked and sobbing, she dialed emergency services, her voice barely coherent. The operator's calm questions and instructions sounded a world away as she pressed a towel to David's wound, repeating, "Please, please, wake up. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Police and paramedics arrived to the scene minutes later. They found Emma collapsed beside her husband's body, tears streaming down her face, the evidence of their shattered lives all around them. Neighbors peered from darkened windows as flashing lights painted the rainy street red and blue. Emma, numb and in shock, was led away by officers, questions echoing in her head over and over. How had it come to this? Could any moment have saved him? Saved them? As dawn crept into the soaked and silent neighborhood, one truth was certain. Nothing would ever be the same. Daybreak brought no comfort, only harsh reality. The Milligan home, once warm and inviting, was now cordoned off by yellow police tape, its windows reflecting the flashing lights of patrol cars and the quiet presence of investigators. The neighborhood buzzed with rumor, but no one really knew what had transpired behind those rain-streaked walls. Emma spent the first hours of mourning in a sterile, windowless interview room at the police station. Her hands trembled as she described the night over and over. The arguing, the anger, the way everything spun out of control. Each retelling left her more exhausted, her voice hollow and raw. Detective Lucas, a patient man with graying temples, led the questioning. He asked about her relationship with David, their history, the recent distance, any known troubles. Emma wanted to tell the truth, but how could she describe the complexity of longing, guilt, and betrayal? She answered each question carefully, omitting the affair with Mark at first, clinging to any sense of dignity she had left. But the police had already begun assembling the puzzle. They discovered the wrecked phone, sifted through old texts, and gathered statements from friends and neighbors. Mark's name came up again and again, first as a friend, then as something more. Julia, unable to hold back, told officers about Emma's recent behavior, the late nights, the shift in personality. Mark was questioned next. He arrived with a lawyer, his face grave but collected. "I care about Emma, but I never meant to cause harm," he repeated. "I wasn't even at the house that night. I just wanted her to be happy." His alibi checked out, but his messages to Emma painted a clear picture of a complicated, passionate affair. Everywhere Emma turned, guilt and suspicion waited. She couldn't sleep, her mind racing with the same questions. Was it her fault? Should she have left David sooner? Ended things with Mark? Said no more forcefully when the boundaries began to blur? The autopsy confirmed David's cause of death, a single, fatal blow from an accidental fall. But the bruises and signs of struggle told a story of a fight that had spiraled far beyond words. Prosecutors debated whether to press charges for manslaughter or to view it as self-defense. Emma's tears, her frantic 911 call, her lack of prior violence, all became pieces in a narrative that swung between tragedy and blame. Meanwhile, the community reeled. Neighbors murmured that they should have seen the signs. Emma's workplace put her on leave, and Julia brought groceries and comfort, but the old warmth was gone. The house remained empty, every possession a silent witness. Emma, released pending investigation, wandered through the days like a ghost. She refused Mark's calls, unable to face the part he'd played in the chain of events. Her focus, for the first time in months, was entirely on David, his memory, their lost years, the love and pain that had bound them together. The official inquest loomed on the calendar. Emma's lawyer advised her to be honest about everything: her affair, her unhappiness, her intentions that night. As she sat in the empty house, preparing for court, Emma realized there was no version of the story that could bring David back or restore what was lost. The investigation drew to a close, but the sense of reckoning had only begun. Emma's future and her freedom now hung in the balance, determined by strangers who would never fully understand the storm behind closed doors. Emma stepped into the courthouse, her heart pounding in her chest, surrounded by a crowd of unfamiliar faces, reporters, legal professionals, and community members eager for resolution or perhaps just a new story to whisper about. The city's attention, once so distant from her quiet life, now pressed in from every direction. During the inquest, Emma sat quietly while the prosecutor reviewed the evidence. There were photos of the bedroom, David's clothing, the cracked phone, and transcripts of text messages that revealed the slow unraveling of trust in their marriage. Mark took the stand, reiterating his absence that night and expressing regret, not for having loved Emma, but for the chain of sorrow their affair had begun. Detective Lucas gave a measured account of the investigation, confirming the struggle between Emma and David and stating for the record that the fatal wound matched an accidental fall. The bruising, the broken vase, the frantic 911 call, all painted a picture of chaos and panic, not premeditation or cruelty. Finally, Emma's turn came. Her voice trembled as she recounted the events that had led them all there. She admitted to the affair, to her restless longing, to the decisions made in moments of weakness, loneliness, and hope for more. She spoke of David's pain and her own regret, tears falling as she confessed. "I thought excitement could fill the emptiness, but I broke the things I loved most." The judge listened carefully, weighing what was said and all that could never be put into words. Emma's lawyer argued for leniency, reminding the court that her actions, while tragic, were not born of malice, but of human frailty. After hours of deliberation, the court reached its verdict. Emma was found not guilty of manslaughter. The death was ruled a tragic accident, a devastating consequence of tempers lost and a love stretched to its breaking point. The relief in the courthouse was muted, overshadowed by grief. Mark left quietly, slipping away before Emma could speak with him. Julia embraced her outside, whispering, "You can start over. It's never too late." But as Emma returned to her empty house, uncertainty settled in her chest. The furniture, photos, and familiar routines were all reminders of a life split in two, before and after. She began to sort through David's belongings, each possession a memory to be reckoned with, each room a reminder of the price of secrets kept too long. With time, Emma started to rebuild her life. Therapy offered her a place to untangle guilt from grief, to remember both the good and the bad of her marriage. She reached out to old friends, learned to walk alone by the river where she and David had once dreamed together, and allowed herself to imagine the possibility of new joy, new love, someday. The scandal faded from headlines, but its echoes remained. Neighbors whispered less. The city moved on. Emma found, in the quiet, a fragile peace, a wisdom earned at great cost, that the hearts of those we love are more fragile than we ever believe. She would never forget the nights of excitement or the pain that followed. But as she watched spring return and sunlight spill through her windows, Emma understood that even shattered truths could, with courage and time, become the foundations of something new.